Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's xLights Gems presentation on using and running effects in FPP and xLights. With that, I will turn it over to Ron Armstrong. And go ahead, Ron, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another fantastic Wednesday night gym session. As Andy mentioned, tonight we're going to be talking about effect sequences. And I will apologize. My daughter's dog is here and somebody's walking down the road. Anyway, um, maybe I need to put her in another room. She'll be fine. Um, she is dead quiet until somebody's walking right in front of the house. So
We can't
apologize about the
hear it.
noise.
We can't hear it.
Perfect. Good. So effect sequences, they come in two different styles. We'll talk about both today, why you might do one versus another, and then you can have those. So we come up with this content because I had an xLights user reach out with a question, and they had a model in their show that they wanted to be part of their regular everyday sequencing, but they also wanted that model to do something specific on command. And that particular question was push a button. They wanted that model to do something. But we do a lot of things with like angel wings and other wing stations or whatever, where we do individual sequences, but they're not part of the show. So those are like standalone items. That's been well covered. In this scenario, what we're going to talk about is how to make them part of the show, potentially be in some of your sequences, but then be able to like trigger something new to be on that model for a period of time, right? Using an effect sequence. So how do those layer on top of it? Which one takes precedence? Which one doesn't? So a little housekeeping. I've got a little show directory set up here with a handful of controllers and just a common little layout, a little house, some models and some things. And so first, what we're going to talk about is a pixie wing model. Next, we'll talk about like a tune 2 sign. So I'll use this virtual matrix definition as like a tune 2. And then we'll talk about like wings and why that's different. So the first effect sequence type we're going to talk about is just called an effect. And it would be a specific sequence type called an ESEQ as opposed to an FSEQ. So an ESCQ is an effect sequence, and you can really easily create them for any singular model. So for our pixie wings, we'll notice as we look at these, that is one singular model. For our tune 2 sign, in this case, I'm just using a virtual matrix. That's a singular model. So those will be real easy to create effect sequences for. If you wanted to run an effect across multiple models, an example, 2 of the angel wings, because these are independent models. If I wanted to create an effect for both of these models, I cannot use that same method. So we're going to talk about that second half of the class. All right. A little bit more logistic. That's a little bit about a layout. All of these props are set up on controllers. I do have in my lab, and I'm gonna ask you to use a little bit of imagination tonight. So I got a little IP camera here pointing to part of my lab where I have these trees set up. So as we trigger and cause effects to occur, we're gonna watch on the camera the behavior that we see, so we can see the results of what we just set up. The right tree over here, this is a little medium-sized mini tree. We're going to have to pretend that is not only a tree, but also a pixie wing for the pixie wing singular model. Later, when we get to the angel wings, the left tree would be the left angel wing and the right tree would be the right angel wing. So when we get to that, we'll be able to call that out. So we have to use a little bit of imagination. Don't have wings available to really show you, but we can still have the effects trigger and have that effect show up on this model, which would be representative of the pixie wing. So let me flip over here to my show player. So I happen to have an existing sequence set up in this test playlist. I can hit play. That sequence will be running in the background. Sorry, I want to set this on repeat. Get back to the camera. So you can see an effect going on these trees. This is representative of your regular sequence would be your whole show. So your wings are part of the show and they're doing sequence things, but then I want to trigger them to do something else. So how would we go about doing that? So in xLights, I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new sequence. In this case, I'm going to select an animation sequence and I'm going to specify 40 frames a second and quick start. My recommendation in creating there's some technical details at the end of the class tonight we can get in if you want. But for this scenario where I'm playing a sequence and also going to be simultaneously playing an effect on the same prop, I would recommend that you set the timing signal to the same as your sequence is playing. So if you're normally a 20 frame a second sequences, then set your effects for 20 frames a second. If you're typically 40 frames a second, then set your effects for 40 frames a second. Right? Not terribly critical, but just that's my method. Everything we're going to go over tonight, there are multiple ways, like most things in these types of light shows and xLight shows, xLights and FPP in general, there are multiple ways of accomplishing the same thing, right? So these are my methods that I use repeatedly over and over again when setting up other shows with interactive elements. So I created a new empty sequence here. We got all these different models. If I look down here, I have this model called Pixie Wings. So let's put some effects on my Pixie Wings. For simplicity's sake, I happen to have some imported sequences here already. So maybe I'm going to pick Pixie Blue Flapping and let me just do an import. It's going to have some effects already set up for different submodels on these Pixie Wings. So let me just auto map those, say okay, and I quickly just set up a bunch of effects on, whether I did that manually or did it import, doesn't matter. But these are now the effect that I have for this model called Pixie Wings. So to create an ESCQ or a standard effect sequence type, we're going to select our model in our display elements list. Right click, go down to model in the menu. Then I'm going to render and export. When I render and export, I get a new dialog box that's going to have multiple formats of what am I going to export. In this case, I'm going to suggest FPP compressed subsequence or ESCQ. Now you can do a standard subsequence or you can do the compressed. I usually do the compressed. Space saving, smaller files, all that kind of thing. By default, it's going to try to name your ESCQ file the same as your model name. I'm going to hit these little three dots, look for what I have here already, and then give it some other name. Because I'm going to create multiples of these, right? So I might have, Pixie Blue, a Pixie Green, and a Pixie Red. This is my blue one, so I'm going to pick the name Pixie Blue. And in my case, it already exists. I'm just going to overwrite it and say, okay. So as soon as that rendered for that model and exported it, that's why an effect sequence is on a singular model. If I happen to be on a group, right click model, I do not get a render and export option because you can't render and export for multiple models, just a singular model. So this works well for those cases where I want an effect for one model. So now I just created this ESCQ file. What do I do with it? Well, as it turns out, FPP Connect, this sequence is not saved. I don't really care to save this one right now because I can re-import it, just some effects for the effect sequence. So you could actually upload these to your FPP instance. In this scenario, my Pixie Wing is connected to a Raspberry Pi Pi Hat. That Raspberry Pi happens to be configured for GPIO input buttons too, but the input buttons is not going to be the tech talk tonight, but I'm going to use an input button to trigger this just as an FYI. So I'm assuming I'm in the camera shot okay. I have like a little key fob button. I can push a button to trigger a GPIO input. So I'll use that just as a quick way of saying start effect. And it's as soon as this comes back and shows me my FPP instances. And so I know that Pixie Wing is defined on my TestPy 1 controller. So since that's where I'm going to start my effect is on the same controller that is connected to the wings. So in that scenario, then that's where I want my effect to be stored, would be on the Pi. In this case, it's a Pi-based controller. It could be a Culp controller. It could be whatever. I'm going to run the effect on the controller that's directly connected to this model in this scenario. So pick the Pixie Blue. These others are already there. I did those last night, but here 7:30 is the date from just a moment ago. So I'm going to put that on the Pi and I'm going to say upload. Boom. Now let's go to that Pi. Test Pi 1. Content setup file manager. And when I come to the file manager, I don't see that, because I'm on the sequences tab. The effect sequences that are specifically ESCQ show up under effects. So if I go to effects, I can see which effects are already uploaded here. You see this in here, I just uploaded a moment ago, 7:11 p.m. That's my blue. I happen to already have the green and the red uploaded from yesterday just to save time. So now I have my effects created in xLights, right? Choose the model, right click, render model, render export, save it, FPP connect, upload it. Now I have my effects on my Pi. So the next step is like, well, okay, does that effect sequence work? Right? Before we get into triggering and some of those other things. So I'm going to want to just manually trigger it by run FPP command. But before I do that, I'm going to switch over to my camera again. My sequence is just restarting, so this will be coming back on again. It was the end, and now it starts back up. So this sequence is sitting here running. You can see that both this left tree and the right tree are kind of doing the same thing, right? So you can kind of see that's part of the sequence that's sitting here running in the background. And there is a little bit of time delay because this is an IP camera. So back to my Pi instance. I'm going to FPP command, and I'm going to choose the command called effect start. Right? And what effect do I want to run? Pixie Blue is the one that we just uploaded. Using this command, we have other options. I'm going to leave the start channel as 1. So in FPP 8 and newer, which is, last year's version, and this year will be 9. We're still in beta for FPP 9. There's a little bit of change here. So we prefer to leave the start channel as 1 and then select the model. So since we're going to run this effect on the controller that wing is connected to, I should have a model for that wing, right? So this allows us to run an effect on whatever channels this model is defined for in xLights. So if your channels change down the road and that model gets updated, so instead of being starting at channel number 100, you add some other things to your show and it becomes channel 1000. As long as you're starting your effects on the model, and then when you do your FPP connect, your models get updated, then this will always run on the correct model, regardless of what the start channel is. In this case, I'm not going to loop effect. Loop effect means run that effect forever. Right now, I just want that effect to run for the duration of the effect, which since we did an animation sequence, that's 30 seconds. So this will run for 30 seconds and then be done. And I only really want this to run if it's not already running, right? I don't want to start effect, start effect, start effect, start effect to the same effect. So I always trigger if not running, so it does nothing if it's already running. So I'm going to quickly switch back to camera. Trees are doing what they're doing. If I say run now, we should see that right tree basically do the blue. Now you see that white tree is doing something different. That is your pixie blue effect that is currently running on that tree, which is pretending to be a pixie wing. It's going to run for 30 seconds. So I'm just kind of talking through this here real quick. So as soon as that's done, it will return right back to where it left off and be part of the rest of the sequence that's already running for your show. And 30 seconds should be coming up pretty shortly, I would think. And there it is. So that ran for the duration that we built that effect for, and then it's done. So that was us manually running that command. Obviously, if you have any questions as we're going through, feel free to post those in the chat. Andy and team are kind of keeping an eye on those. Andy, feel free to catch me if there's any questions as we go through it. Be glad to stop and pay attention. And if I did FPP command, this time and maybe I picked Pixie Green and get ready to run. Oop, I got to stay in the right Alt tab. You can now see that's running the green version of my effect, whatever I created. So the effect can be whatever you created. In this case, I've got like a red, green, blue, effects set up to run on that. So the same thing, just ran a different effect. And here, when that times out, you'll see it just goes right back to being the rest part of the show. So that was the question was, I wanted to be able to sequence my wings as part of my regular show in my sequences and have the wings do fun stuff when nobody's messing with them. But when somebody comes up and pushes a button and said, I want the wing to do whatever the button tells it to do. So using an effect sequence for a singular model event, we're already there, right? Super easy. Not to get into detail on, GPIO inputs and outputs right now, but we'll go ahead and on the same pie is where my input set up. I'll go to input. I have this pin number 19, which is GPIO 10 configured. So if I configure this for those same commands, effect start, pixie blue on the wing too. So I set this up as the same command. And so when I push that button, then I should get the same thing, right? So if I come back to the camera and this will be pixie blue, I'm going to push this little relay button. And as soon as the camera catches up, you can see that switch to blue. So I pushed a button to do the same thing instead of running manually the command. The reason I always make sure we run the commands manually first, because if that doesn't work, then okay, you have something configured wrong with your effect sequence and not the button. So if that works successfully when you manually run the command, but when you push the button, it doesn't work, then that means you probably have something misconfigured with your button configure, your input config. That's about the end of what I'm going to talk about buttons tonight. But if we have questions at the end of the presentation, feel free to ask. Anyway.
Yep. Ron Joel has a question that says, can this be done in X schedule, which is typically no, this is an FPP feature, correct?
There are ways in xSchedule that I'm not prepared to talk about tonight to also run and execute effects. Yes. There are many advanced items in xSchedule that have some feature parity within FPP for things like this, but I'm not an xSchedule expert user, so I'm not prepared to talk about that tonight. But yeah, in FPP, that's kind of what we're covering tonight. Yep.
All right. And then real quick, the next question was, will the effect override a schedule or will the schedule override an effect?
So an effect will be whenever you trigger it, right? So let me go to see what effects are running. Status control in FPP, and then the effects page will show you any running effects. If I go to my command and I run this pixie blue and then say I loop that effect and I say run, that means that effect's going to run for all of time and eternity until you pull the plug or you manually tell it to stop. So when you loop an effect, so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. We're good transition because we're going to move on to tune two sign effects. Is when you loop, then that effect is running forever, regardless of schedule or playing or anything. If I come to my master play here and stop playing, I come back here, that effect is still running. When effects are running, this instance does not indicate that it's running. So when I start an effect, that effect will either run for the duration of that sequence if no loop is configured, but if loop is configured, it will run for all of eternity until you stop it, regardless of schedule, regardless of anything else going on in your show. Yes. Okay, so now how do I stop it? Well, you can either come to the effects page and hit stop, or we can run an FPP command for an effect stop, which then I can pick the effect name to stop it, or I can do an effects plural stop, which just means run all running effects. When I set up a show, and I might have different effects running on different models, so kids can come over here and cause the snowman to turn blue or the snowman to turn red, come over here and have the wings do what the wings do, go over there and have the Santa Claus do something, whatever interactivity element I have, I might have 3 or 4 different effects running. So as a standard practice, I normally on my master player, I would say effect stop. I would turn on multi-sync, which means it's going to send this command to all FPP instances that are part of your show. And I can say run now, and that just immediately stops all effects on all instances that received the multi-sync signal. So that's kind of like the master effect stop that stops all effects on all instances. And normally I would put that in like a lead out of my playlist. So I think that answers the question. I hope. I'm going to go switch real quick to the Tune 2 instance, which is very, very similar. I'm going to discard these changes. And I actually saved a sequence for my Tune 2. Saved it as a regular FSEQ sequence. And I made an extremely complex tune signal sign to display on my matrix element. Extremely complex because I got 2 layers. I got a marquee and some crazy colored words, right? Obviously, you can be whatever effects you want on your Tune 2 sign to make your Tune 2 do what it is. And I was being sarcastic when this is complex. This is very, very, very simple. Again, right click, model. I'm going to export, render and export. Make sure I'm on compressed subsequence or ESCQ. I'm going to come here and I'm actually going to name it. I named it called Tune Effect ESCQ, whatever. Let's overrate that. Boom, done. And so that, saved. I'm going to Tools FPP Connect and put that on my, in this case, I want this to play on my virtual matrix because I'm going to upload that to my virtual matrix controller, which happens to be a different Pi. Maybe. So it acts like it's discovering, but it's don't see anything progressing. There it goes. Yeah. Just progress bar. So I'm going to upload this. Why this didn't show my new version of the file? I don't know why, but I'm going to pick the one that I messed with last night because I don't really care if it's the same as the other one anyway. So that effect is on my test VM. This is my virtual matrix controller. So this has my HDMI output that's connected to my TV. I don't have a camera facing that right now. I'm going to restart this master sequence just running in the background so I can look over, see my TV, and it's doing this sequence stuff. So I don't have a camera to watch that. So a couple things different about how I'm going to do this. So command just to test, I'm going to effect start. I've got this tune effect. That's the only one I've got uploaded on this instance of my FPP. Right now, I'm not going to loop it, and I'm going to display that on my matrix model that's defined so he knows what start channels. Make sure start channels 1, and I'm going to run, and I can look over at my TV, and I can see that yes, it is playing, has the marquee effect and the light show tuned to 100.1 FM, right? So it's playing what I set. And if I go to here, effects, I can see that the effect was actually started, and I'm going to manually stop it. Now it's stopped, right? Cool. But I want that to come on automatically as part of my playlist, right? So my playlist is on show player. So I'm coming here and edit playlists. And right now my playlist just has this one sequence. It's kind of a very light duty playlist. But maybe I want my Tune 2 effect to start at the beginning of my show, play for duration, and then stop at the end of my show. Right? And so if that's my intent, I'm going to add a sequence entry. And the type or the playlist entry, excuse me, add a playlist entry. The type of entry is going to be an FPP command. In my available commands, I'm going to do a remote. So I'm going to talk about today's version 8 and 9. Things are planned to change in 10, but there are some remote effect starts. So I'm going to temporarily use the remote effect start, which these remote commands are going to be deprecated in upcoming versions of FPP, and there'll be a multi-sync method. There'll be a different method. I can use the same command to tell that command to run on different instances. Because on my master show player, I want the playlist on my master show player to trigger an effect on my Tune 2 matrix controller, which in this case is a Raspberry Pi connected to my TV. So I'm going to do a remote effect start. The remote IP, this shows me all of the available devices. I know that's on test FM or test VM for my test virtual matrix. Now the effect name, because this is, looking to do it remotely today, the effect name does not populate. That's something that's going to be improving in future versions. When I select a remote device to run an effect on, it will pull the list from that device, but that doesn't happen today. So I just know this has to be typed exactly. And I'm going to do this differently because there's something there I'm seeing that's not included. Shifting gears on the test VM. One thing I meant to bring up earlier and I was going to bring up later, but now is the perfect time. When we go run like an effect start command, we have a lot of options to choose, right? So we saw like when we went to do the button, I had to choose the same options. I saw when I'm getting ready to configure a remote effect, I got to choose same options. I prefer to use a command preset, which allows me to define all of those options. Command preset, I'm going to call that tune 2. I'm going to give it whatever name I want. And then I'm going to pick that command, effect start. Sorry, that was off the screen for a little bit. I'm going to pick the tune 2. I'm going to make sure that's on channel 1. I'm going to make sure and pick that model, the matrix model. And in this case, when I start this way, I do want it to loop because I want it to run for the duration of my show. I'm going to start at the beginning and end it at the end as one method, right? One option. So I'm going to accept changes and I'm going to save this as a command preset. So now with the command preset, I can call this command preset and not worry about having to redefine those options every time I configure it, right? So now I just say trigger command preset and it'll automatically trigger no matter what these settings are. If I wanted to change these settings, I would only do this in one place. I change the preset and I wouldn't have to change things like buttons or remote commands or any of those other things. I would not have to change those. So that's high value on my item is command presets to define a command with options. And then you can reuse this preset over and over again, including you can actually trigger this preset within an xLight sequence. Right. So I can have an xLight sequence trigger a command preset at some point within my sequence if I wanted to. A little bit more of an advanced topic, but if you have questions on that at the end of the class, we're happy to discuss that. So now that I have this command preset on my show player, what I'd rather do is I'm going to add a sequence entry. I'm going to do a trigger, remote trigger command preset, pick my remote. That's going to be on the test VM. And the preset name, I called it tune 2. Add. So by adding an entry that's in the middle of my main playlist, I'm going to drag that up to my lead in, which means that's going to happen at the beginning of my schedule. Remember, I configured this command preset to loop and play forever. So at the lead in, I'm going to start this sequence. And then I'm going to add an entry for my lead out. And this time, this is going to be my global effects stop multi-sync, stop all effects on all devices. Drag that into the lead out. Save my playlist. So playlist is made up of three sections. Lead in executes one time at the beginning of the schedule. The main playlist will loop over and over again for the duration of the schedule. And then when the end of the schedule occurs, the lead out will play, kind of intro and outro. So in this case, we're going to start the effect on, it's going to connect to this 20.235, start this tune to preset, which is the preset we just configured. And then the lead out is going to be stop all effects. So save playlist. Come back here. I'm going to stop everything. So let's say I got my schedule at 8 o'clock. It hits 8 o'clock. My schedule is going to start. Boom. I start it. And it did not trigger the effect over here. Okay, so let's troubleshoot. Let me go back to my command presets. Say run now. Check my effects. That's running. So the command preset's working. I'm going to go back to my command preset. This is why this is going to improve over time. I'm going to copy this preset name. Make sure I have that spelling exact. Then on my player, I'm going to stop everything right now. I'm going to go ahead and do next. Now I'm going to do my remote trigger command preset. Pick my test VM 235, right? Preset name I'm going to paste. Run now. And that did just execute. So if I look at my presets or my FX, it's playing. Right? So if I run that command, run now. That did not run it. You might notice that this test VM is on an alpha version of 9 that's not yet been updated to, and I'm pretty sure this worked yesterday, but that's fine. I'm going to move on to the new method and do trigger command preset, multi-sync, choose test VM, preset name, tune 2, run now, and that started just fine. Yep. So I'm going to change that command instead of remote trigger command preset to just trigger command preset. I know there's been some work in 9 to prepare for the future. And so I don't know if that's an artifact of running 9 alpha on this machine or not, but I was testing some other stuff on that version. So, okay. So let me go back to my playlist. Like troubleshooting live, right? So why did that not work? Let's look at every layer, every step of the layer. Check this step. Oh, that worked fine. This step, oh, that did not work. So obviously there's something there with that step. So I did not want to add an entry. I want to come in here and edit this entry. And I'm going to go ahead and set that to, so the new method coming up will be run the command, turn on multi-sync, pick the host that you want that to run on. And then this should in the future will actually populate all the presets from this device. This machine's still on 8.5, so this doesn't retrieve the remote side. So we'll still just paste the tune 2 just to make sure we have the right name there. Save playlist. Let's go back to get ready to start. There are no effects running on the, I'll look over the TV, no effects running. Come back to the show player. I'm going to start the show. And that effect is running. So, okay, so it just started. And that effect, because of how we defined that command preset, is going to loop and run forever. So my tune 2 is playing at the beginning of the night. I'm sitting here running, playing. I'm going to hit next just to skip to the next section of the playlist. Boom. That just executed my lead out, which is effect stop. And if I look over in this tab, that effect is stopped. So recap real quick, what we did for the Pixie Wing and the Tune 2 use the same effect style. That's a subsequence type or an ESCQ effect sequence. With the Pixie Wings, we kind of showcase how you can trigger that with a button or an input. And then on the Tune 2 sign, we showed how we can integrate that into the playlist on our master controller and have the master controller remotely tell that Tune 2 sign to start the effect for the Tune 2 sign. So I covered both of those topics. Any other questions coming up right now, Andy, for those topics?
No, nothing yet.
Cool. So the other effect type that we can do is utilizing an FSEQ effect. I'm going to go to this show player as an example, file manager. And to get a better understanding of the differences, I'm going to pick like this blinding lights sequence. This is my main show sequence that we've been testing with all night. And I'm going to view sequence info. So sequence info gives us some data about this FSEQ file, such as the name of the FSEQ, what the version number, the FSEQ file format version number is. Here are some of the audio file settings. And more than anything is ranges. Like, so a full FSEQ usually will have a start channel range. This is all about channel addressing and where it starts, what's its length. So there's different ranges in here for a standard FSEQ. And up here at the top, you can see the step time, the number of frames, the maximum channel count, and what is included. So basically this beginning here is this includes all channel ranges from 0 to 129,208. So if I create an effect, an FSEQ, standard FSEQ, that only contains effects for a singular model, that FSEQ is still going to have the entire channel range for your show, and all of the other channels will just be blank 0. Right? We'll not have channel data for everything else. So if I say I want to create an FSEQ of just my wings, which are my angel wings, which are 2 different models, and if I try to play that, the rest of my show goes black. Because that FSEQ contains, normally would contain all channel range for all of the items that are in your show. So to do an FSEQ effect, my method, there are a couple of ways of solving this equation, is to create a sparse FSEQ. So a sparse FSEQ will only contain data for the models that are defined in your master view of the sequence. So let that sink in a little bit. So a sparse FSEQ will contain only the channel data for, which is a subset of your entirety of your show. If the models that you want to use, in order to effectively do an FSEQ effect that's a sparse FSEQ type, the models that you want to have included in that effect have to be in a continuous channel range, which means they have to be adjacent to each other in channels with no gaps. So in our wings, that works out fine because you'll notice I've highlighted those over here. So I got start channels and end channels. Let me scroll over just a little bit more. So my first wing starts at channel 128.609, ends at 130.108. The second wing, it begins just exactly after that, 130.109, and ending where it ends. So the key about creating an FSEQ effect that's only on certain models, that FSEQ has to be a sparse and contain only that channel range. If I wanted to do an FSEQ effect on these spiral X's, sorry, let me hit the right key so I can multi-select here. It would not work properly in this scenario because see, this guy ends at 128,608 and this guy begins at 132. So if I did a sparse FSEQ containing these two models, it's going to contain a channel range well in between them. So that would contain blank data for those other channels and it would black out other models. So make sure whatever you want to be included in your FSEQ effect type, that they're adjacent to each other, which means that, it can be 2 models, 3 models, 4 models, as long as they're all adjacent. For those with a keen eye, you may note that I have configured today, these wings are not, they're adjacent, but they're actually technically on 2 different controllers. Because one of the following questions was, yes, I can do an effect like earlier, we were talking about the pixie wings, and we executed the effect on the same controller that the wings are attached to. Can I have an effect that technically is controlling models that are on different controllers? And the answer is yes. And in the case of an FSEQ effect, they can even be on different controllers provided that they're adjacent. So if you look at my controller tab, you can see that controller 1 is so that model is the end of this controller and the right wing is the beginning of the next. That would be atypical. That's not normal. I just wanted to demonstrate, as long as those channel numbers are sequential, it doesn't matter if they're on one controller or 2 different controllers, and if it's the same controller where we're going to run our effect. Because in this scenario, we're going to run the effect on the master, and there are no models connected to the master, and he's going to send the data to these models. You have to check one quick setting on my master, and I'm pretty sure it is. This is not relevant to tonight's class, but I just want to make sure that setting was still set the way I wanted it. And it is. So to create a sparse FSEQ, number one, I'm going to want to go to File, Preferences, Sequences, and here I can specify the default save for FSEQ version. Out of the box, the default setting for xLights might be like V2 uncompressed as the default FSEQ version. And in order to manually create a targeted specific sparse FSEQ, we have to change in preferences the sequences FSEQ version to be V2 compressed sparse. So now whenever in xLights, if I create a sequence, that sequence is going to be a sparse sequence. And we'll demonstrate that. So I'm going to do a new sequence, animation, 40 frames a second, quick start. I'm going to do an import, and we're going to, because I had something pre-saved, and go to my imports. In this case, I'm going to pick, I think I want to pick blue wings. Why not? Blue wings. Let's just import those effects. I'm going to auto map because that's going to automate. Everything went gray, so everything auto mapped over. I don't care for that. So let me come down here to my wings. And if I expand these, you can see that I have various effects. Now, this is the left wing called wing. And my right wing is called wing 2. And if I select that, I can see the right wing. Remember, those are adjacent to each other in the controller config, which normally means adjacent ports on a controller. So I have these. And if I right click model export like we did earlier, I'm only going to get that one wing. I'm not going to get both of them. So I'm going to save this as an FSEQ. So to demonstrate, I'm going to leave this as is for now. You notice that my master view has all my elements in it. I set xLights to be sparse. I'm just going to save this. And I'm going to save this guy as Wings Blue FSEQ. Sure, why not? Right? Let's replace that. So when doing an FSEQ effect on subset of your models, I'm going to recommend not doing FPP Connect to upload that sequence. When doing FPP Connect, depending on your settings with FPP Connect, you will either, because it will refactor that FSEQ file based upon your settings in FPP Connect. So if you have V2 selected, it's going to do all channels regardless of what you told xLights. And if you do sparse, it will do all things for that controller regardless of what you told xLights. So just manually content setup file manager. I'm going to go to that file directory where I have that. Find the FSEQ file. I called it Wings Blue FSEQ from 745 just a moment ago. And I'm going to upload that guy. Uploading complete. Look at Wings Blue from 730 at 746. Choose sequence info in this case just to demonstrate. And you'll notice that the range in here is my entire channel ranges. Even though I configured it for sparse, it's the entire channel range. All right, so when I look at my sequence, and specifically the display elements, I have all items in my display elements. So when I save that, even though I told it sparse, it's going to save based upon everything. All these other elements have blank. So that sequence will contain blank data for all those other items. So if you want to do the sparse, which is what we're looking for, I'm going to right click the edit display elements. I set up a preview with only the wings, copy that to master. So now my master view for this sequence only has the wings. I have the wings expanded right now, but you can see now the master view for this sequence only contains these elements, right? So I'm going to hit save again. I'm going to go back here. You can see the FSEQ save date that didn't refresh. 747, which is just a moment ago. Let me re-upload that. Let me get rid of this back to here. Now let me re-upload the new one. Uploading complete. The upload date for Wings Blue is 748. So I was updated. Look at sequence info. Now you can see that that technically starts at this channel number. So now I have my sparse that starts at the appropriate channel number for the length of 3,000 channels. Well, in this case, I'm doing double wings, which are 500 on each side, 1,000 pixels, which is 3,000 channels. So this just created a sparse FSEQ that I was able to manually upload that only contains this channel range for those specific models. Nice, right? I don't have anything playing right now. Let me go back here and my show player, close this, go back up here, status page, start the show, except I want to actually start it on repeat just so it continues to run. View my camera. So now that we're talking about the angel wings, we have to pretend that the left tree is the left wing and the right tree is the right wing. So I uploaded that onto my master player. So just to test, I want to run FPP command. And in this case, instead of using effect start like we did earlier, you'll notice I don't have any actual effects. I have to use FSEQ effect start, which now shows me all of my FSEQs. So if I choose wing blue, I don't want that to loop. And run now, we should see both of those trees in my camera view do the wing sequence. And they are different. Now my main sequence happens to be in a blue section right now. So hang here a little bit. So now you can see that the spiral X is still doing the main sequence, but both of the two trees, so basically that's my wing left on the left and wing right on the right, are doing that specific FSEQ, and I'm not interrupting the tree. The tree is still doing the normal sequence as it is. If I look over at my virtual matrix, it's doing the virtual matrix just as is, not interrupted. That effect is done and everything is right back to what was playing before. So again, recap, I'm just gonna rerun this FSEQ effect start, wings blue. Remember we set that for 30 seconds. So now those two trees just are doing the wings blue. And now I'm running an FSEQ sparse effect type as an effect that will run when I look at the effects page on the player, because I'm playing that on the player and the player is outputting that to the two different controllers effects. You can see that that effect is running. And here in a moment, that effect should stop running because we'll exceed the time that it was automatic because we told it to only run for the duration of time. A little bit more complex. One thing to keep in mind is an FSEQ effect. This will be demonstrated in File Manager. Choose that FSEQ and sequence info. An FSEQ effect type, because we save that as a sparse, has the actual channel numbers defined in it. So the FSEQ effect start command doesn't allow us to specify what model to run it on because technically this is running on a series of channels, no matter how many models. So it doesn't know what model. And so if my channel numbers change, I would have to reopen that sequence, resave it, and re-upload it in order to get the channel numbers. That's a stark difference on an FSEQ effect type versus an ESCQ effect type, is an ESCQ does contain the channel information. However, running in the ESCQ command, which again is for a singular model, you can specify what model it is and what you can specify what channel number so you can override the channel definition that's inside of the sequence. So quick summary, an ESCQ effect type was fantastic for singular model effects. A sparse FSEQ effect type can be created and ran if you had multiple models you needed that effect to span over, provided those models are in a consecutive channel range. Yes, I talk with my hands sometimes. So that scratches the surface on that. Hopefully it gives you some ideas. We didn't talk about things like background versus not. That's a different topic. Everything we did today was assuming you wanted your models as part of your sequences, and then you wanted to temporarily overlay an effect on top of that to have your models overlay an effect. So technically your sequence becomes the background in that scenario, and the effect becomes the foreground. So everything we did today was based upon, I wanted to start an effect over the top of a running sequence. And I know people have asked about backgrounds. We can talk about that a little bit as well, but that's an inverse relationship to that. So any immediate questions about topics we've covered today on running effects in FPP and the two different effect types and where those may or may not be useful?
Go ahead and unmute and just shout out your questions now.
Sure. So Ron,
Yeah,
want to run wings the beginning and just let the
yeah,
wings run through the whole show.
sure.
Would
Kind
we
of do
run?
their own thing, their own way, and just let them
Yeah,
run.
yeah.
They're just
Because I don't
separate
want to
from the
have to
show. Yeah,
put I don't want to have to put the effects in 60 different sequences, but I just want to put them out in the yard so
yep.
people can do their selfie shots. So if that's the use case, would you think the best way to do it is in the scheduler as a pre-FSEQ and let it run on loop, or as a ESEQ and use the FPP run command?
Well, so with the pair of angel wings, right? So technically the EFL angel wings I'll speak
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
because
yeah,
those are the ones
yeah.
I have are two different models.
That's fine.
So running a singular an ESEQ won't work because that's two different models,
Okay, that's fine.
right? Yeah, yeah. Now there are ways of doing that by way of using like a shadow model, then ESCQ export on the shadow model, right? There's another method besides what I showed tonight. As well, sometimes people just split the data and have both wings be exact mirror of each other, and the ESCQ would just be one wing, and then they would just mirror the data to the other wing. But depends on what effects you're running, that might not give you the result you're looking for.
Right.
But right, so I would have, if you want your wings going full time with a background sequence, that'd be a use case of a background sequence. So I'd have a background sequence running that's just running full time. And then when you do the wing press, I would probably do like insert play, because you're probably going to start that with the start playlist and start your
Yeah,
back.
yeah, exactly. It's
Then when
going
you
to
have your button,
start the wings at the beginning of the playlist
yeah.
and
So
let
then,
them run the whole show when the playlist
yeah.
run. Yeah.
So then the button can basically be insert playlist immediately. So it would insert whatever that button was. So say red,
Yeah.
and it would insert immediately. So then it would be red. And then as soon as red is done, it just goes back to what was running as part of your schedule.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
yeah,
for the
yeah.
clarification.
That's not even using effects to accomplish that because
Yeah.
it's its own system. Your sequences you have just have one sequence run on a schedule and just run in a loop forever.
Yeah.
And then your buttons do an insert playlist immediate for whichever playlist you want that button to trigger. And a
Yeah.
playlist could be an individual sequence, right? So
Yeah.
insert playlist immediate can be either a playlist or an individual sequence.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. One of the things I do with my wings is I do a single button wing. And so I have a playlist with 6 wing effects. And I schedule that playlist to run every 30 minutes. So top of the hour, bottom of the hour, top of the hour, bottom of the hour. And those 6 run probably 7 minutes or something like that, right? I think one of the sequences I have is about a minute and a half, and the others I set up as a minute. And so at the top of the hour and the bottom hour, it just plays that, and then they're dark the other time. Now, when I push a button, because I'm using a singular button, I have my button by way of a script, and there's several ways of accomplishing this, but my button basically says, if not playing, start playlist. Else, skip to next item.
Yeah.
So if a playlist is running and I push a button, it skips to the next, skip to the next, skip to the next, skip to the next, skip to the next, and then it's at the end. But if nothing is running and people come up, they can push the button and that starts at the beginning, but then they can, every time they button, it just like it's a cycle, right? It just cycles from 1 through 6, 1 through 6, 1 through 6. And that way I was able to set up just a small single button push box instead of like 5 or 6 different buttons. And technically I can run as many sequences as I want that way because my button is just a next, next, next button instead of an individual button for an individual sequence. There's just a variation on a theme and how I kind of deployed that setup for the Magic Potty show.
Cool. Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions, verbally or otherwise, or anything else that talk a lot about buttons and inputs, but I'm happy to talk about whatever topics people are find related. Yeah, this is
No more
blinding lights
questions?
playing. This is blinding lights playing in the background if anybody recognizes that, but it's like not that it really matters. I just wanted something to demonstrate flashy blinky, right?
All right. Well, then I guess we can stop it here. Thank you, Ron. Another great presentation. Thank you. Thank you. And with
You're
that,
very welcome. If anybody has any questions, feel free to, ask away after the or not. You can reach into the Zoom room. All the Zoom room helpers know how to get a hold of me, or I frequent the Facebook groups regularly as well. So if you have any immediate questions, I'll do my best to answer any way I can. Thanks,
Yep.
guys.
Thanks again, Ron. Enjoyed it.
You bet.
Thanks, Ron.